So in Overwatch and all real video games that I play, I'm a very competitive player. I like to put time in there, try to rank up, enjoy myself while doing it, but honestly, I get most of my fun from games, from winning competitive games, winning close games, winning stuff that takes me a lot of effort to achieve. And as I've been going on and on and on with Overwatch, I've always been thinking to myself, is this really a good competitive game, or is it not a good game? And really what I can do is just compare it to my previous competitive experience and kind of just some other stuff that I've really been feeling about the game to overall decide for myself and, kind of help you guys, I guess, a little bit decide if Overwatch is a competitive game, and if so, I guess, how competitive. Now, to start with Overwatch, I feel like one of the main problems that I have with the game that, I don't know, I guess maybe it's just a big nitpick, is that the game is all about hero switching. It's all about hero swapping, going all these different characters, countering each other's roles, but that doesn't really ever happen. In the game itself, essentially how it boils down to is that there's one meta that's always better than all the other characters, and you pick them. And normally I'd be kind of fine with that if it was a game where maybe you could ban some characters, where maybe you had to lock into your pick, or do anything like that, so there was some different chances to maybe change up the games a little bit. But in Overwatch, it doesn't really do that. In Overwatch, you're kind of stuck to the same comp every single game if you want to really try to competitively win a match on average, which I feel like does hurt the game. Maybe it doesn't make it less competitive, but as far as making it so that there's more competitive players, I feel like that definitely does kind of delete a lot of players. A lot of players don't want to play the same heroes against the same heroes almost every single game, and feel like if someone does not choose one of the meta heroes, they're trolling. That's something that I don't feel like is way too great about this game, and something that I feel like really does hold it back competitively, but I guess that's just one of the main things. Now, I guess some more really main things about the game, as far as its competitiveness. I feel like one big problem with Overwatch that does really hold it down as well is that the game is essentially a complete team-based game. It's a complete team-oriented game, and while I wouldn't say that's necessarily bad when you look at it on paper, when you actually try to think about it and try to think about, the players playing the game, ranking up, improving, and enjoying themselves, it does hurt the experience for a lot of people, and for myself, it kind of does as well. Even when you compare Overwatch to other team-based games, for my main example being League of Legends, there's a big caveat. In League of Legends, you have maybe 10 to 15 minutes where you can prove yourself, show how good you are in that solo lane, or I guess if you're the jungler, show how good you are at making ganks, getting calls, stuff like that, and then it transitions to the teamfight phase where your stuff that you did earlier on matters in the teamfights. Well, if you're not that great at teamfights, it's still okay because you could, of course, carry really, really well in your solo lane, push up, and, kind of split push and win. Overwatch doesn't really do that, though. Overwatch is so much more of a team-based game than I feel like any other team-based game is, and that's kind of hard for players in many ways. One way is that it's very hard to tell when you're getting better, and I feel like this hurts players a lot. When you're playing again, let's say, for example, League, you can easily see, I'm starting to hit more CS, get more gold, I'm starting to get a lot more kills in my lane, I'm starting to outplay my opponents, all the stuff like that, doing really well. However, in Overwatch, it's a bit different. When you get better, of course you can tell sometimes, but a lot of times it takes a lot longer to be able to notice because you get better at your team fights, and that's mainly it. There's mainly in Overwatch team fights and 1v1 or 2v2 skirmishes that are kind of like tiny team fights that are very close to each other, and that's the bulk of the game. And a lot of the time it's kind of hard because you improve at the bulk of the game or you improve at something that's really kind of small, and it's kind of hard to improve at the whole bulk as everyone else is also focusing on the same thing. I guess one problem that I have with the game that kind of holds it back competitively is that there aren't like so many different little mini spots of the game that you can look at, that you can improve at, that you can, maybe abuse that your enemies aren't doing. A lot of the time it's just, you focus on team fights, maybe you become someone that's really good at getting picks, but those are your main two options. Those are the main two things you can try to do. And the game essentially runs very similarly to almost exactly the same every single round, so it makes it kind of hard for you to pull out different strategies that will work continuously and that are kind of different, and overall just kind of play with different parts of the map at different times. I don't know, maybe that's just with me, but I feel like Overwatch does kind of hold you down just a bit in what you're doing. Now, as well with that, I feel like a problem that comes with the, being almost entirely a, team-based game that really makes it not as great competitively is that it's really hard to actually test yourself and know that you're doing more. And I guess this kind of relies off the previous point, but personally, it can be kind of hard as a competitive game to get motivation to keep playing this game, especially for myself. I find myself continuously going back to other competitive games. League of Legends, 1v1 fighting games, I go back to those a lot even while I'm playing Overwatch, maybe just because I'm burned out from the game, but I feel like mainly because in those games I can feel genuine improvement very quickly. I can feel myself getting better, enjoying the game more, beating up more matches, maybe learning some nice new routes, maybe just upping my mechanics a little bit. And it's quite easy to tell what certain parts of the game I'm getting better at. While, again, in Overwatch, it's kind of hard because the game is very general, and a lot of the game is very focused on like the same thing, so everyone's kind of improving at the same thing again, and as well with that, it's kind of hard to actually test your individual skill because so much of the game and so much of the team fights and so much of everything like that is based off the entirety of your team, not just a single individual member, which I guess can be good. It can make so you have to focus on your team fights, focus on your team play, and everything like that, but I feel like it does come with the problem that, again, it's hard to tell for yourself, and a lot of people I feel like think that they are much better than they are because they do okay in team fights, but I guess a better example for this is that they do really well in 1v1s, but they don't do that great in team fights, but they're like, I'm getting all golds, I'm getting all these 1v1 kills, I'm doing all this stuff, and that can kind of trick people into thinking they're doing a lot better than they actually are, which, I don't know, I guess can be kind of hard for the game and make it kind of hurt as far as competitive. But those are mainly just as far as the player goes, the enjoyment of the game, everything like that. I've split off, I've come back, I've done everything like that. But I feel like as far as, especially as a competitive game to watch and to enjoy watching, it's really not up there in my favorite games. I love Overwatch. I love to play the game. I love to talk about the game, everything like that. But trying to actually spectate the Overwatch League, I think, is just very difficult. I feel like especially on King of the Hill, it's even worse. But, on slow push maps, it kind of depends. For the most part, what it seems like when you're watching Overwatch is that essentially they poke at each other a little bit, and then there's a huge explosion of a team fight. Somebody wins, somebody loses, and then reset, poke it a bit, explosion, and that's for the most part. Of course, sometimes there are some really cool, miraculous, like 1v3 plays off to the sidelines, but a lot of the times those don't even really matter that much because even if you take out like two of the opponents, a lot of times people could just stall on the point or stall for a few seconds to let them come back, and you really do need a lot of team wipes to do way too great as far as when you're watching competitive, which, I don't know, it can get kind of annoying and get kind of boring to watch, just the same thing again and again and again. Especially I feel like a problem with this game is that there are a lot of options, there are a lot of things to do, but again, since the meta still so far, so much, and since everyone can pick the same characters all the time, it's just often what happens. And when you watch a meta for like months, let's say I watch like Season 5 meta, and for months on months, I just see the same thing again and again. For months on months, I just see dive comp. The same characters, maybe switch out one or two characters with people's, miraculous mains, and that's it. Of course, I'd get bored watching that. When I could compare that to a game where maybe there's only 30 characters in the game, but, it's a 1v1, so, it switches up quite a bit, and I could see maybe half the cast being used, like 15. That can be kind of cool. Or as well, when you're playing a game like League and there's like 130 characters, you can see like at least, about a fourth of the cast often being changed up and being used, and, people being banned and the best characters not being able to be played every single game. I feel like all those different factors coming into play can really kind of show how those games kind of work as far as spectating them, and while it doesn't really work as much in Overwatch simply because it just gets kind of boring. I feel like the general gameplay, it's very fun to play, it's very fun to be in, the team fights are enjoyable to, go through, but even as far as just watching the game, and even if you didn't care about the stale metas, and, not being able to pick way too many characters and actually do that great, I feel like just how the team fights work really isn't that beneficial for the game as a viewing sport. Which kind of hurts it as far as a competitive game. When less people are watching the game and less interested in the game, less people are playing the game, and less people are trying to rank up in the game, and less people are really excited about trying to get to that highest rank to climb up to what they saw in esports, because there aren't that many esports. And I guess that's why I feel like sometimes Overwatch feels like a terrible competitive game, because there aren't that many people to watch to climb up to other than just random solo streamers. And again, these tournaments just aren't very popular, and they aren't just very interesting for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like to watch them. If you're wondering what I'm talking about with the tournaments, it's that for the most part, in most other games, there's some poking, there's some damage, then they overall just, I guess, have different phases of the game. Well, again, Overwatch is mainly a little bit of poke sometimes, pushing through, team fights, and that's about it. Which does get kind of boring. And as well, the team fights are very hectic in Overwatch, which can also get kind of annoying to watch when you've been trying to watch it for a few games. I guess one final thing I want to talk about Overwatch is its ultimates. The ultimates, I feel like, are a really cool idea. I feel like they work in the game well. They're really nice. But maybe the game has a little bit too much focus on ultimates, which can be kind of annoying. A lot of the times I feel like ultimates can kind of counteract a lot of other skills in the game. If you're very good at using your ultimate at the right time, of course you should be benefited for that. But a lot of the times, that's all you really need to win a lot of your games. You could have pretty trash aim, you could have pretty trash positioning, but if you get one really great Zarya ult and you happen to take the point on a 2CP map, you might have won that game. And I don't know, I feel like that as well can just sometimes make the game feel like maybe it's not as consistent and it's not really tracking your progress as much, and that, you know, one good play can make up for a game worth of bad plays. I don't know, that's kind of hard as far as that goes. With that said though, you know, I've been giving Overwatch a bad rap. I feel like it is a very fun game to play competitively. I feel like especially in the ranked ladder. When you're watching the top level streamers and the top level everything, of course, there are the one tricks, but for the most part you see about the same team comps every single game. However, when you go to the lower levels, to the levels that the majority of us play at, sure, you're probably going to get raged at for not playing the meta, but you can not play the meta, and you can enjoy the differences of the game. You can enjoy the nuances of the game, and you can try out new things, and especially I feel like the team fights are very fun when you're playing them. When you're in the thick of it, when you're trying to decide who to go for, when you're trying to decide when to use your ult, all that different stuff, I feel like it's very fun to play in, and I guess that's mainly what we need. I guess it is fun to play in, and it's fun to go through. And I guess that's good enough for a lot of people, and a lot of times that's good enough for me. Sometimes I might get bored of how the meta's going, sometimes I might get bored of what's going on, and sometimes I might get bored of how slow it takes them to change a lot of the characters and how terrible the PTR is at doing its job that they kind of alluded to what it was going to do. But in the end, I feel like a lot of the time it is fun, and a lot of the time, you know, it can bring you a lot of good games, and it can bring you just really enjoyable experience. You just kind of have to know what you're going after, and you kind of have to know that maybe if you want to have a game where you moreover focus purely on yourself, it's not always the best game to go for. And there's a lot of other skills that you might learn in this game that you might not learn in other ones, such as communication, you know, timing, and, you know, aim, and a lot of other stuff as well. But I don't know, maybe that's just my own opinion of Overwatch and why it's a terrible and a great game at the same time as far as the competitive mode goes. I feel like there could also be a lot of fixes for this, a lot of changes, but I feel like it's much too far into the game's development and cycle for anyone to accept any changes, so we pretty much just have to accept how it is right now, and I guess that's good enough. It's still a really fun game, and I still am liking playing it quite a bit. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, hit that like button for me, as I feel like talking about these subjects doesn't get as many views, but is much more fun for me. Sorry this video went all over the place. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to talk about. I just had a lot of different ideas that I felt like I really needed to put into one video, and here we are right now. If you did get all the way to the end, type NA number 1, then a little happy emoji. The happiest emoji I will favorite and I will reply to, and you will be the best commenter on my channel for at least a few weeks. So do keep that in mind. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day. As well, if you want to see any videos like this at the top right of the screen right now, there is a card that you can click on. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the video, but there you go.